Now I'd like to introduce Arup Pramanik, Corporate VP and Head of Global Market Access in the Inflammation Therapeutic Area from Boehringer Ingelheim, to speak about pharmaceutical access from transactions to ecosystem collaboration.
Thank you. So it's a quick one. That was my previous role. Now I sort of do cross-TA work, supporting the EVP for our TAs. Now my topic of discussion is a little bit different. You've heard some great speakers, and I wanted to take a little bit of a context, having run and led medical teams, commercial strategy, and access teams. So I'm going to share some slides, but these are slides where I'm going to ask you to sort of get into the conversation with me, okay? So I'm going to learn from you as much as I'm hoping to share some stuff with you. All right, now, you can all agree that traditionally when your bosses ask you, hey, I want you to tell me what the price is, most conversations is not telling you what the value is. And that's changing, right? Essentially what you realize today is you need to do value demonstration. How involved are you with the medical team ensuring that you are developing a strategy that is price but value focused in the ecosystem? And I think as you begin to realize, we are transactional. We are not value-based in an ecosystem beyond the few markets. So what I'm proposing here is a conversation around, can we move from being transactional leaders, right? An access team does phenomenally well when you have access in a country. But the problem then is, you're realizing today that when you talk about PCOS and others, we don't often have enough conversations with our payers and saying, what parameters, both primary and secondary, do you need so that you can launch? I remember in my previous company, the CEO says, I'm not interested in registration. I'm interested in finding access solutions. And that is really upon us in our teams. The problem really is, because of AI, governments and hospitals that sit and look at your data also have technology to look at information. So even if they tell you, go back and give me this simply to buy time, they also have information. So it's becoming increasingly competitive and difficult for us in access to say, here's the data, because they will give you something else, and it creates redundancies in a system because interpretation is very different. The other element is, what is the long-term benefit? Now, every drug has a point of time where it does not work. And every other organization is coming up with innovation which is incremental. 3 months of overall survival, something to PFS, the other one is at 4 months. So innovation lasts because competition tells you otherwise, but the price is set. And at the end of the day is, can we as an organization be more talking the holistic conversation? And it's not about me selling, it's me working with you because you have a solution and a problem too. Now let's take the US. In 2023, 21% of the expense of the health system was because of pharmaceuticals. 24% or so was administration. Then you have and then you've got IT, which is taking about a 22% proportion, and then the rest are redundancies within a system. The fastest escalation are two: IT and healthcare provided by pharmaceuticals. Now, you cannot push the doctors and the nurses' salary down, and that's going to come out from a chunk coming out from AI. So we need to be there, not with an IT company, but with an ecosystem. I'm just throwing it out there, and I'm going to be throwing a few pieces there as I talk. Now, this is us. All of us in Access are very proud about our prices, okay? But then there is a problem. 18% say, I'm happy with you, Pharma, for what you do, and that increased essentially because of COVID. We were an active participant in an ecosystem problem. Now, 60% say it's negative, but if you look at it and you broke it down, and I'll ask you to look at this because there are some things you will take away. When you have a 65-year-old, they don't like pharma. Where else the younger population, okay, the 18 to the 34, the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys, they seem to think you're okay. Now, can I ask you, why do you think the adult population is not happy with us? Any guesses, please? They have most likely paid for the drug. They are most likely paying for the family, as John had suggested, right? These are family parents who are paying for someone else. There is the pain. The younger is yet to understand that pain. What do they do not like about us? Mostly it's a high price. It's something that says you are a profit-driven organization and there's transparencies and gaps in what you're doing. So how many of you actually determined the price of your last drug? Be proud to say you're one of them. Have you been leading those? And you've done that very nicely, right? So in some ways, I feel guilty because I've done that too, right? And it comes at a cost. And we are on the other extreme because we did what we thought was right, because we knew that business is coming from some of the markets that are going to do that. Now, there are three things happening right now, right? There is Trumponomics, okay? There is that young population of people who are going to really change the ecosystem socially. Now, I'm going to sort of seed those ideas into you because pharma does this very well. We talk to our patients. We get them involved very early. Now, these are busy slides, I'm sorry. But then there's a few things we can do better, right? We get them involved as patients and ecosystems in early engagement. We say, guys, what do you think the trial should be designed? The EMA now says, I'm going to take patients, qualis, and PROs into our clinical trial design. The question is, how do you transfer that? Now, for one moment, let's just pause. In the UK, ICER is at almost £30,000 per year. In 1999, when NICE, and correct me if I'm wrong, suggested that's the threshold, the GDP and PPP at that time was about 28,000. Today in UK, it's about 52,000. But yet the ICER has stuck. And many a time the ICER was GDP, PPP. And yet we in industry are not having that conversation. And I think this is where we as an industry have to take a conversation, right? You're pushing us down. And that was the time when I remember the Gleevec of the world were coming in. Today we have technology that is for a patient at a time the patient needs it. The slides I'm putting up is simply an ecosystem challenge question, right? It's not about access, it's about we as an industry. And the reason I wanted to put up the slides is because most of you are already leaders, or you're going to be leaders tomorrow, right? Not provocation, but a conversation, okay? And here's the problem, okay? This is the reality. Can we change this? In Europe, it takes 511 days. And Europe, essentially, if you do well in Germany, you're good. But the question is, how are we changing this conversation? What are we doing? And I come back to Mr. Trump, not because I advocate for him. He's made a problem for a lot of countries around the world. We'll take Europe, for example, right? Today, BMS is saying, I've got a drug which is an antipsychotic after 20 years. And we're going to price it the same way as we do in the US. The governments are listening, okay? And this is the time that you and us, and as an organization, we should take this conversation up, right? How much are you willing to spend if we can take advantage of, as you mentioned, IRPs? Because end of the day, well, it's called most favored nation. I call it most preferred nation because he picks and chooses who he prefers at that point of time, okay? So if we were saying this is what we are basically an organization that is always advocating for a conversation with our payers. The conversation should be with a big sector of individuals. And I like what Joanne had said, that the patient journey is a long journey. What do you do to transcribe the journey? And for me, the question is, what is that economics that you are willing to take? Why should a 20 or 30,000 euro ICER not be 400,000 for a rare patient when the US says it's okay? So here's the one. I wanted to put on a human aspect to sigmoid. Sigmund Freud basically said it is the I, it is the me, and it is the we. So if you ask yourself, if I want to be part of that ecosystem, sorry, I know this is not a lecture, it's a conversation. Okay, the I is, I'm going to have this drink tonight. It's me. Okay, I'm thinking of myself. And then it is the so-called me, as I've understood. Remember, this concept is not about the individual, it's society that you live in. So he's always taken a societal view to you. And then the last element is when you have actually morally changed to think of the we. Now, if I took that into the clinical trial designs, having led medical teams, I'm trying to bring that into, if that's the I, and is that the me, and then the we, how do you play that within your clinical trial designs, right? So if you take that wonderful slide that Joanna showed, right, the patient journey, it's the I part. It's I in that journey as an individual patient and understanding that outcomes. The we is when the me is when I started thinking about the cost effectiveness. It's the HOR team saying this is what the me is because it's what you need to do in proposing the value of your asset. And the we component is what's the long-term benefit? Now, the questions raised earlier, right? Can real-world evidence and AI play a role? It has to play a role. Because what you do not see, and our organizations, like many, spend millions of dollars over the years to do registries. Shao and our team is asking the same questions. So from your registries, what subpopulation would benefit for the next drug, even with a similar indication? We don't know the answers. We spend millions. The question here is, when you take a drug, develop a better drug with some efficacy, how can you use AI and technology to look at data? And how can you then transpose that into the economics of that data for a product in execution and post-launch? Because that's the only way you can reduce cost. You cannot have that conversation at this price, at this cost. It's in a story. It's not. So if you could have everything nicely done and you have mapped the patient journey and you have HD and data, the question is how good is your data? How much have you integrated data in technology? And in the last component is, have you built trust? Now, to build trust, you don't do that at the time of lunch. Now, we are having conversations with international academics and hospitals. And, I think the previous was saying it's pilots. Yes, it's our pilots because, believe me, there's always this conflict between the medical, the commercial, and the access team. Medical, to say you work within this conference, and I think you were saying that, do you want to do risk-based trials because the trial was designed this way? I think we have to say, yes, we want to because that's what you did, but this is what more we need to do. And until we have that certainty, we can get into value-based. So that if you look at the data now, you can sort of project what you want to do. So as you put through yourself preclinical engagements, and this engagements is with your research team, the pre-launch is with your development team, post-launch is obviously very commercial, and then obviously maturity is how much technology do you have if your patient has access to the same tools you have to make sure that even post-launch they will continue taking a drug at a different price. Now, so I think the access team, phenomenal, right? It's a great time. Gen Zs and Gen Ys have the technology to follow you through that conversation. They are smart, they're looking at technology, they're more Google doctors than they are doctors. Then the other part is digital technology. Is it us, is it them, and is it a patient? Because patients today have tools to understand whether they're progressing. Question is, how much do you want to partner them? Then there's data, and there's sort of analytics that also predetermines risk and outcomes. Because sometimes if I were to say, pre-seeing the doctor, here are the 5 things I do, Doc, you've got those answers, treat me better. And suggestion for you is, when you think access, start at that patient level, right? Think about the function, the collaborations. That conversation cannot be industry. It's you, your teams talking to a whole ecosystem out there. It's the outside-in approach all the time. Yes, I know we have folks talking to governments and patients, but I don't think we've done a very good job bringing it together. Correct me if I'm wrong. Invest in digital. Everybody is doing it. Sometimes I think we're overdoing it, not sure exactly what it is paying it out for. And in the last part, build relationships, right? So the success is cross-functional. Now, I sort of wanted to cut it short because my good friend took some time off. I also wanted to make sure that you have some time for coffee and tea. I know these questions are rather at a higher level. I don't want to be preaching to all of whom you know, but I just want to throw it out there because that's a conversation I wanted to keep open. Have I done justice? Do you have any questions, or was I going, locals and off the track? Any questions? Please.
You mentioned the investing in digitization and digitization of market access. So
Yeah.
what would be the ideal, according to you?
Yeah. What would be ideal?
Space in market access we need to digitize, or even in the value chain overall. Like in the company.
So I'll give you an example. We're doing what we call a micro-segmentation project. Okay, we're taking one particular therapy, understanding within that therapy how patients respond in a standard of care, even where there's intervention available. When you look at that from data, we suddenly realize that when you're putting in the code itself, most patients don't have treatment or they're taking the wrong treatment. Now, if you start saying PCOS is going to take this, the question is, if we don't do this now, this PCOS will have an impact because we don't understand what is likely to happen. So the technology exists, the data you can buy, but the data has to be how you place your protocol in at this stage, and then you follow that through launch and post-launch using the same data sets because you need to compare the future. So if you do that even a simple path, you're almost there. So I don't think you need to invest in the tons of people selling you data. We buy data, and I ask my friends in the other team, oh, I'm also buying the same data, what the hell's going on? I think we can find solutions, but it has to be really at a patient level in that journey. Smart investments, but I think this is where the medical team has to agree with you, or the epi team, or whoever team believes that you're following the same system. I'm not sure whether that answers your question, but I hope it does. All right. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thanks. A very good overview. If you think that through, what do you think outcome-based commercial models or commercial agreements between payers and manufacturers are the future to also contribute to the solution of this problem?
All right, so thanks. So if I take this question, right, where she said, what did you think you will invest in? And we have product A, which does a certain something within a subset of a patient. Now we're coming with a new drug, and the competition is coming out with a new drug. And I'm going to say that my trial is designed for a primary and a secondary endpoint. I know that using this data, I can, without calling it indirect treatment comparison, saying this is what I can hold through at this launch. When I sign this contract with an agency or with the government and say, I've seen this drug, I'm confident I can challenge the medical team with that outcome. Now, I know I'm going to price this at 20% more than this because of what I understand as the gap, and I will take that through. Then you're really working with the institution, with the system provider, with the technology company, and you saying, I will follow this through because I do not want to lose my patient. And if you follow that through, you're really not going to lose money, you're actually going to gain money. And that's coming from the more patients that are lost in the system to the more patients you capture and the price you generate because you're defending that patient in the outcome because they are part of that solution. So it's a straight line with an elevation. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, I was thinking about, society will be willing in 10 years from now or whatever to only pay for outcomes.
Perfect.
No matter what
Yes.
kind of evidence you produce until the moment you are regulatory approval or reimbursement. And the question is, no matter what kind of evidence you have, there will be a certain statistically massive patients which will benefit more or less or not at all from this drug.
So you're absolutely right. Yep.
The evidence that you produce, because there will be always a high uncertainty for certain patients, or
Correct. You're absolutely right. So as you're micro-segmenting that subset, you're already risk calculating what you believe your risk will be for that subpopulation because not everybody will get it. So you're right. That's why we need this data 2 or 3 years before the launch, and you follow them through after that. Is it pure science? It's a bit of science and a bit of art and a lot of luck.
Yeah, exactly. Just building on what you just asked. I'm just thinking about significant scientific innovations in, let's say, mRNA technology. They come out now. Treatments are launched now with a scientific degree of uncertainty translating into the value uncertainty because it is an absolute innovation, new technology, and the science is learning with all these clinical trials. So, for example, if you have some of these treatments that are offering at the moment 3-month OS at a high degree of side effects, you know, with these eye, you know, ophthalmology problems. And if I'm putting my HTA hat on and I will be thinking, oh my God, if I do a risk-benefit assessment, they shouldn't come to the market at all. But it is a learning innovation, it is a learning technology. So I think there's a problem of how to reward this within the calculation of a new value assigned outcomes-based agreement.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's where I see a problem. And then the second point is on your slide where you applied the Sigmund Freud model, where you spoke about reflecting the value within the patient pathway. And that's, again, right, if you take the mRNA technologies, you have all these treatments of side effects within the health system. Who is then accountable for change?
Right.
Who is accountable for delivery?
So 2 parts of the question, right? I think pharma, our team, for example, we've sort of come to that point where we kill the project before it gets there. And that's something we as an organization take because, hey, this is not going to work, it's not going to meet any of this, plus it's 5,000 questions. So before that happens, we take it. Now there are people within the organization who say, no, we've spent so much, we're going to make that happen. After that happens, we need to calculate that amount of post-marketing reporting and understand that risk. And so it multiplies in a very different angle, where we try to stop it, kill, you know, projects as much as they want to deliver. So it's us as an industry to stop it. And messenger RNA is a good thing to have. All right? So I want to say thank you very much. My pleasure.